NSFW, which is the dirtiest joke you know? A man washes up on a desert island after a shipwreck. The only other survivors are a dog and a pig. There are plenty of resources on the island, so he doesn't have to eat them. After a few weeks of solitude, though, he begins to get lonely. He decides the pig would be closer to a human, so he tries to have sex with it. Every time he does, though, the dog attacks him, fouling his attempts. This goes on for months until, finally, his prayers are answered and a beautiful woman washes up on the beach. They get to know one another, and finally one day he gets the courage to ask her, "You know, I've been here a long time and I've gotten very lonely. If I ask, will you do something for me?" She says, coyly, "Of course. Anything you ask." "Perfect. Will you hold that dog while I fuck that pig?" Teacher is asking the kids what their parents do for a living, and little Timmy pipes up, "My dad is a stripper at the gay club across town. Sometimes if a customer really like him, they go into the alley out back and he makes extra money." The teacher is of course mortified and quickly moves on to the next child, but asks Timmy to speak with her after class. She starts to speak with him about his father's questionable job when he interrupts her and says, "Don't worry, teacher, that's not really his job. I just made that up because I was too embarrassed to say what he really does." Taken aback, the teacher asks what he really does. "He plays shortstop for the Orioles." Or substitute whatever local and / or shitty team and position makes the joke work for you. I met an older woman at a bar last night. She looked pretty good for a 60-year-old. In fact, she wasn't too bad at all, and I found myself thinking she probably had a really hot daughter. We drank a couple of beers, and she asked if I'd ever had a sportsman's double. "What's that?" I asked. "It's a mother and daughter threesome," she said. As my mind began to embrace the idea, and I wondered what her daughter might look like, I said, "No, I haven't." We drank a bit more, then she said with a wink, "Tonight's your lucky night." We went back to her place. We walked in. She put on the hall light and shouted upstairs, "Mom, you still awake?" Edit: I know I sound like every Redditer who has ever lived, but thank you for the gold. My puny unoriginal joke is completely unworthy of such an honor. A teacher asked her students to use the word fascinate in a sentence. Mary raised her hand. "The animals at the zoo were fascinating." "That's great," said the teacher, "but I'm looking for fascinate." Sally raised her hand. "I was fascinated by the exhibits at the museum." "Good," said the teacher. "But again, I'm looking for fascinate." Little Johnny raised his hand. The teacher hesitated, since little Johnny was known for being vulgar. But she decided to give him a chance. "Okay, Johnny," the teacher said. "Share your sentence with us." "My sister has a sweater with 10 buttons, said Johnny. "But her tits are so fucking big she can only fascinate." There's a woman pregnant with triplets going to the bank to take out a loan to help pay for her children's baby supplies. Suddenly a robber runs in with a gun and demands everyone to put their hands up. The pregnant lady refuses and he shoots her 3 times in the stomach, hitting each child. She's rushed to hospital and miraculously all 3 children survived, including the mother. One day when the kids were all teens, one of them knocks on their mother's door and asks to speak to her. He says, "Mom, when I was peeing a bullet came out." And she tells him the story of the time in the bank. The next day another kid knocks on her door and says the same thing. The mom tells him the story too. The third day, the final kid knocks on her door and asks to speak with her. Before he can speak, his mom says, "Were you peeing and see a bullet come out?" The boy says, "No, I was having a wank and shot the dog." A guy goes into this bar, sits down and orders a drink. While waiting, he sees a guy sitting at the bar who has a very big muscular body but a little tiny head. So, he asks the guy, "How is it that you have such a huge body and a small head?" The guy replied, I was walking along the beach one day and I came across this bottle buried halfway in the sand. So I picked it up, brushed away the sand, and out popped this fine female genie. She said she would grant me 3 wishes for releasing her. For my first wish, I asked for $10 million, and poof, right there on the sand was $10,000,000. For my second wish, I asked for a luxury yacht, and poof, right there on the ocean was a 90-foot yacht. Finally, for my third wish, I asked to have sex with the genie, but she said that genies were not allowed to indulge in that kind of activities. So, I said, "Kman, how about a little head joke?" I been to that bar. Their mascot is an alligator they keep in the alley. There's a one-eyed lady who lives upstairs in room 318 and gives blowjobs for $10. She's just across the hall from this old lady who is constantly trying to talk people into a mother/daughter threesome. One night I'm there and this guy comes in claiming he just got back from being stuck on an island with a dog and a pig. I ask him what he did before the island. He says he worked briefly as a gynecologist and had a side hustle as a pizza man but quit both jobs to sail the fresh air of the seas. He sees the sign that reads free drinks for anyone who can make my horse laugh. He questions, how do you make a horse laugh? I reply, you'll have to ask the 3-legged guy at the end of the bar. He sees a sign right beside that one which reads free drinks for anyone who can beat the challenge. I lean over and explain, the bar's mascot, the alligator, has a sore tooth. You have to go pull the tooth. He thinks for a minute and says, there's a lot I won't talk about from the island but I think I can pull that tooth. I continue, but that's not all. The lady upstairs gives amazing blowjobs and has a lovely singing voice but she's never had an orgasm. You have to make it right for her. The island man quickly declines, I'll pay for my drinks. Some time passes and he's become somewhat intoxicated and is running low on cash. Bartender. I accept the challenge. First the alligator, then somebody tell that lady to send little Johnny out on the balcony with a popsicle. The bartender rings a bell and the bar quiets in anticipation. The island man stumbles toward the alley door to find the mascot. Someone exclaims, he's gonna do it. Next thing the whole bar hears is banging, clanging, trash cans knocked around, a holler and yell, and then silence. Then the island man, looking a bit rough, emerges through the door and slurs, now where's the lady with the tooth? A couple of researchers contacted a zoo to ask if they could record gorillas mating, to be used at a primate conference. The zoo administrators agreed and the date was set for the following week for them to come and record as the female was in heat. The 2 researchers showed up with their equipment on the day and were greeted by one of the zoo personnel who informs them that the male gorilla had passed away. The researchers were crushed. As they are all standing there with glum moods, the zoo official spies a janitor walking by and has an idea. He quickly talks to the researchers and they all agree. The zoo official approaches the janitor and explains the situation. He then asks the janitor the important question, would he have sex with the gorilla for $5,000? The janitor thinks it over a minute and says he will do it. So they let him into the cage, they start filming, there is a lot of screaming, yelling, grunting and crying, and finally it is over. The janitor walks out, covered in cuts and bruises and pretty dazed. One of the researchers yells out that the camera wasn't working correctly and they would need to do it again. They ask him if he would do it again because the cameras were screwed up. He thinks about it for like 10 minutes, deep in thought, and then responds, I have to decline, I just don't think I could afford paying another $5,000 bucks. Timmy and Jimmy get caught with drugs, and are arrested and put to trial. The judge sees them as just innocent kids and tells them that they can either do 5 years in jail for possession, or they can do a PSA. They have a week to prove that drugs are bad to people, and whoever turns the most people away and gets the most pledge signatures gets a $100 gift card. The two boys accept the challenge and do one whole week of this PSA challenge before returning to the courtroom and present their pledge signatures. Judge asks, "So Jimmy, you got 27 signatures in your pledge book, how did you do this?" Jimmy says, "Well, Your Honor, I showed them a graph of a small dot and a big dot. The big dot is your brain before drugs, and the small dot is your brain after drugs." Judge: Impressive. Now it's your turn, Timmy. You got an astounding 117 signatures, how did you do this? Timmy: I did the same thing, with a graph of a small dot and a big dot. I said, the small dot is your asshole before prison and the big dot is your asshole after prison. My ex used to tell me he said I'm the only person to have understood it to the point of laughter. It goes like this. A sadist is sitting at a bar having a drink, when a masochist walks in and sits next to them. They get to chatting about sex and the sadist says, "Oh, you see, I am a sadist. I love to inflict pain on other people." The masochist raises their eyebrows in interest and says, "Oh, what a coincidence. I'm a masochist, and I love having pain inflicted upon me." After some more talking, the sadist says, "Shall we go back to my place so that we can have a bit of fun?" And the masochist eagerly agrees to go. So now they're back at the sadist's place, with the masochist tied to the bed. The sadist had to change into something more appealing. Once he comes back to the bedroom, whip in hand, leather suit on, and the masochist looks at them eagerly waiting to be struck. After so much waiting, the masochist finally and excitedly says, "Are you going to strike me with your whip?" The sadist tilts their head back with laughter and goes, "Ah ha 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 ha. No." Long one, bear with me, that's what she said. Guy forgets his wedding anniversary so has to make up for it. He's frantically trying to find something to buy. He remembered she said she wanted a parrot. Guy goes to the pet store and asks to see the parrots. They are all too expensive, so he asks the pet store worker if they had any cheaper. Worker takes Guy to a room in back. He finds a parrot that speaks fluently and eloquently, though it has no legs, but his pecker is wrapped around the perch. Guy buys the parrot and his wife loves it, so he's off the hook. Every day he comes home from work and talks to the parrot and asks about his day. One day in particular the parrot said something strange happened today. Guy asks what. Parrot said the mailman dropped off the mail like usual, but the wife invited him in and they sat on the couch together. The guy isn't too upset but asks the parrot to continue. Parrot: well, he put his hand on her leg and they leaned in. Guy: then what? Parrot: they started kissing and taking each other's clothes off. The guy is mad. Guy: then what happened? Parrot: they fell on the floor naked and started rolling around. The guy is furious and about to kill the mailman. Guy: what happened next? Parrot: I don't know. I got a boner and fell off the perch. My friends and I have a pet orangutan. Problem is, when she goes into heat she is very hard to handle. Well, that time had come, so we decided we needed to get her laid. We scoped out a local homeless area and found an old wino walking out by himself. We approached and asked, "Hey old man, got a question for ya, what would ya say if we asked you to fuck this here orangutan?" The old man looks in the back of our truck at the animal and slurs back, "Hell, buy me a jug of wine, tie that bitch down where she can't move, put a sack over her head, and I'll give er a fuck." My bud runs over to the local bev shop and grabs a bottle of some cheap M/D. We give the wino the bottle and he just starts guzzling. While he commences to quenching his thirst, we start tying the orangutan down. We leave her on her back and tie all four limbs to the truck bed corners good and tight. Satisfied she couldn't move, we placed the bag on her head. We then turned to see the wino taking his last swallow of wine. He looks at us with a lustful drunk expression and says, "All right, let me at er. I'm gonna nut this bitch." The wino gets on top of her in the missionary position and just starts fucking for all he's worth. He's bucking and rocking and the orangutan starts getting excited. Somehow she breaks a leg free and brings it over the wino. The wino doesn't miss a stroke. She breaks free the other leg and slams it down on the wino's ass. Wino doesn't miss a stroke, just keeps on fucking hard and fast. My bud and I are just watching in amazement. 3 dudes are stranded in the desert. They see house in the distance with the truck next to it. They all go knock on the door and come to find this ugly fat woman answering it. They all ask if they could get a ride into town. She says yes, but one of them has to have sex with her. They all draw straws and the one dude gets the short straw, goes upstairs with her. They both get undressed and she asks, "Are you ready?" He replies, "Give me minute." He runs downstairs and looks around for something. He opened the fridge to find some corn on the cob. He takes it upstairs, fuck her with it, and then throws it out the window. She says that was some pretty good sex. Now if you want your first friend to go, you've got to fuck me again. He runs downstairs, grabs another corn on the cob, fucks her with it again, and chucks it out the window. That was even better. She says, now if you want your other friend to go, you gotta do it again. Runs downstairs, grabs corn, fucks her, throws it out the window again. That was the best sex I've ever had. Okay, I will get dressed and you go get your friends. She tells him. He gets his clothes on and heads outside. When he finds his friends, he sees them sitting underneath the window eating something. His buddy then shouts to him, "Damn bro, you missed the best buttered corn ever." Humor is best delivered in context and unexpected. I have a million little jokes and zingers that just wait inside for the right trigger. For example, a couple years ago I was gathered with a large group of people and they were telling stories of when they went skydiving. I told my story in all seriousness. I went skydiving, but when the time came to jump out of the plane, I was the first in the group to go. I stood at the door, looked out, and I just couldn't bring myself to jump, so I stepped out of line, embarrassed, and made my way back to the middle of the line. I watched the people in front jump and I was confident I'd follow, but, when I got to the door of the plane and looked out, I just couldn't do it, so I stepped out of line and made my way to the back of the line. Again I watched everyone jump and, brimming with confidence, I was sure that this time I'd jump. Again, I reached the door and again I just couldn't bring myself to jump. I turned around to go back and sit down, but there was my instructor, 12 erection in his hands, and he said, "If you don't jump, you are getting every inch of this." At this point I let the story end. Lots of blank stares until someone finally said, "So did you jump?" To which I replied, "Well, a little at first." There once was a family of 5. 1 dad, 1 mom, and 3 boys. All they had to their name was a cow. Without the cow the family would be ruined. Well, one day the dad wakes up and finds the cow dead. Knowing what this meant for them, the dad took his life instead. Then mom comes down to find the cow and her husband dead. She can't live without her husband, so she offs herself as well. The oldest son comes down to find his parents and the cow dead. So he wanders outside and to a lake where he thinks about drowning himself. Only then does a mermaid swim over and asks what's wrong. The son explains what happened to his parents and cow. It was then that the mermaid said, "If you can fuck me 5 times I'll make all this go away." The son agrees and gets up to 3 times but can't go any farther. So the mermaid drowns him. The second oldest son hears the noise and comes running to find the mermaid. She says, "If you can fuck me 10 times, I'll make all this go away." The son agrees and gets up to 7 times but he can't go any farther, so the mermaid drowns him. Now the youngest son finds his parents and the cow dead and wanders down to the lake. The mermaid sees him and swims up to ask what's wrong. The boy explains what happened and the mermaid says, "If you can fuck me 10 times I'll make all this go away." A man, who was hung like a horse and had great sexual skills, dies leaving a grieving widow. After some time she begins to crave the incredibly satisfying sex life she enjoyed with her late husband, so she puts an ad in a local publication stating that she's in need of a lover who was well endowed, skilled, and a kind and considerate partner. After days of interviews and a role or two, she is frustrated and thinking that her sex life is over. Sitting at her kitchen table, drinking a coffee, her doorbell rings. She goes to the door, opens it, looks out and sees nobody on the porch. She closes the door and turns to go back to her coffee when the doorbell rings again. She returns to the door, opens it, looks out, sees no one outside, begins to close the door when she hears, "Hey, lady." She looks down to see a man with no arms or legs laying on the porch. "Yes," she answers. "I'm here to answer your ad." She replies that he must not have understood, that she was looking for a loving, caring, well-endowed lover and that he couldn't possibly possess those qualities. Looking up at her he replies, "I rang the doorbell, didn't I?"